that there's some kind of teaching program going on here, and that it is external to us in some way. And this is, you asked earlier about DNA. Why does DNA figure so much in my work? I was looking for a solution to this mystery. Why do people from all over the world experience the same things in altered states of consciousness? The best explanation, I believe, is that we are dealing with freestanding parallel dimensions which our consciousness is able to enter in these states. But another possibility that has to be looked at is that this information, this teaching program that is unleashed by these plants, may in some way be imprinted on our DNA, something that all human beings have in common. And if it were imprinted on our DNA, then that would explain why the same teachings are given to everybody. It doesn't matter if it's 35,000 years ago or today, a kind of interactive teaching program. And so I investigated that possibility as well. You know, we can understand why useful everyday abilities might be hardwired into our DNA. For example, so-called intuitive physics. If you were to if we were in the same room and you were to throw a rock at me, I could step out of the way, hopefully, and avoid that rock. Right. And in so doing, I would actually be bringing into bear hardwired knowledge. My brain would be doing tremendous mathematical calculations, trajectory, mass, speed, all kinds of trigonometry. I wouldn't even know it. I would just step out of the way. And we can understand why... Yeah, one can understand why evolution has given us this intuitive physics, as it's called. But why should evolution give every human being on the planet, once they enter an altered state of consciousness, a brain module for beings that appear to be half animal and half human, that teach very specific information to us? Information, by the way, that's been taught to scientists. Francis Crick, the Nobel Prize winner, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA itself, admitted shortly before his death in 2004 that he had been under the influence of LSD when he first saw the double helix pattern. It was a teaching given to him in a vision. So the other possibility that we have to consider is that some intelligence may have written this information onto our DNA, perhaps written it on the first DNA that ever appeared on this planet, and it has been conserved and passed down ever since across billions of years of evolution until finally a creature evolved that was able to read that information, and that creature is us. And in order to read it, we need to be in altered states of consciousness. But to explain that parallel inquiry that I undertake in Supernatural, I need to tell you a little bit more about the amazing Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick and the extraordinary ideas he had about how and why life first started on this planet.
Well, he was a genius, obviously deserved his Nobel Prize, and did a lot of hard work. David Icke, by the way, you know David, wanted to entice me by going on a field trip with them, and he said, I'll get you some ayahuasca. And I just said, you know, David, I'm not going to take this trip this time. Didn't want to do it.
Well, it's not so difficult. There are some. It's an extraordinary experience, and perhaps we should talk about it some more in the next sector. One thing I do want to make clear, and I think it's very important for everybody to understand, is that ayahuasca and these other shamanic plant hallucinogens are not addictive drugs. In fact, there is no addictive hallucinogen. On the contrary, ayahuasca and the Central African shamanic hallucinogen called ibogaine have both been used with astonishing success to get drug addicts off their addiction to hard drugs, cocaine and heroin addictions. Up to 50% of cocaine and heroin addicts who undergo a course of treatment with ayahuasca, which I think is properly thought of as a medicine rather than a drug, up to 50% abandon their addiction without withdrawal symptoms and never return to it. And healers are quietly working with these substances all over the Western world today, but our governments will not accept them because they consider them to be quote-unquote drugs like any other drugs. But their fantastic healing effect is very, very clear. Harvard Medical School has conducted a 15-year study with regular ayahuasca users in Brazil, where ayahuasca is legal and protected by laws of religious freedom. And there they have found only positive effects. They have not found any negative effects. People who were alcoholics before are no longer alcoholics as a result of drinking ayahuasca. People who used to beat their wives, now have happy and calm family lives. They've become positive, contributing citizens, and across the board there's been a 6-point increase in IQ. So I think we have to think again about this substance. It's very hard work to drink it, and I'll tell you about this in the next segment. It makes you very ill. You vomit. You have diarrhea, but you have these extraordinary, life-changing, and healing encounters. I do know of examples personally of people who've even been cured of cancers following the drinking of ayahuasca. So a whole new field of information has to come out about this substance.
Everybody gets sick though when they try it?
Almost everybody does suffer from vomiting and diarrhea. One of the names that it's known by in the Amazon is the purge. And this is very difficult for us in Western society to deal with, especially in a public setting. But I think it teaches us a very important lesson, which is to let go of our bodies and concentrate on this majestic thing that we have, which is called our minds, our consciousness.
At this point, it's illegal here in the United States, right?
Well, in Brazil, there are many groups in the cities who've developed what you would call syncretistic churches, which mix Christianity with the traditional consumption of ayahuasca or certain kinds of philosophical ideas. And one of these, the União de Vegetal, the UDV, has recently won a vitally important test case in New Mexico, which is federally relevant and which was settled in the Supreme Court. And they have established that their members are allowed to drink ayahuasca legally in the United States because it is a religious sacrament. It is part of a religion. In that sense, it's rather similar to the Native American church and the use of peyote. So the first steps have been taken to remove the sanction of legal repression and of social stigma, and to bring this amazing healing plant from the Amazon into the mainstream.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is a fascinating subject with our guest, Graham Hancock. We'll open up the Fast Blasts. We'll take some Fast Blast questions, and we'll also open up the phone lines right here on Coast to Coast AM. And our special guest tonight, Graham Hancock. We're going to open up the phone lines a little earlier just to take advantage of Graham being here and your ability to get to us. And then we'll take Fast Blast questions, too, on Coast to Coast AM. So, Graham, as you write, about 50,000 years ago, humankind couldn't do much, and then all of a sudden there was this dramatic evolution, this incredible brain power that we possess today. What do you think happened?
Well, to cut a long story short and recap a little of what we've been over in the previous segments, I think our ancestors discovered altered states of consciousness. And I think they initially discovered these altered states through their encounters with certain plants that they perhaps sampled as food items, such as psilocybin mushrooms, which then completely changed their state of consciousness and put them into direct contact with what they experienced as supernatural beings, with teachings for them from another realm. And I think it was those teachings, and that's why my book, the main title is Supernatural, but the subtitle is Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind. I believe that these encounters with these very probably trans-dimensional beings, or alternatively with a mysterious teaching program recorded on our DNA, were what actually made us human. And the trick is, we have to be in altered states of consciousness to access these teachings. We cannot access them in the normal, alert, competitive, problem-solving state of mind that is so encouraged and praised in modern society today. That state of mind is very important, and it's part of our duty as human beings to be connected, really connected to the material world. But we shouldn't lose sight of the spiritual part of ourselves, which may be the greater and the bigger part of ourselves, and which the historical record shows was fundamental in making us human. We shouldn't lose sight of that, and of the fact that our evolution has equipped us with a means to make contact with those realms in altered states of consciousness outside of the everyday life.
David writes us from Ontario, Canada, Thunder Bay, Ontario in Canada. He said, do the shamans repeat